All right, we'll say good morning. Let's begin. Our shir this morning is, we have two sponsors this morning. First by Lynn Gervanten Caesar in commemoration of the yahrzeit of her beloved father and the founding rabbi of the shul, of the Kehillah, Rabbi Chaim Gervanten, Rabbi Chaim Friedel ben Yitzchak Dov, Zichron Livracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, his neshama will have an aliyah. Also by Greg and Rachel Levitan, the zchus of a refuah shalema for Greg's mother, Esther Bas Shoshana. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, shall have a complete and enduring refuah. Shkoyach. All right, I will say, let's begin. A lot of beautiful Gemara to do today. So we left, today's daf is Kuftes 109, and we actually left off on Kuftes 109. We are picking up four lines down from the top. So the Gemara will remember again, we're in the middle of the really fascinating discussion concerning orders of priorities for inheritance. In other words, ultimately, again, who comes in what order? So remember, what we established yesterday, the one good takeaway is, what we've established is, who is the first in line to inherit a father, ultimately is a son. The Gemara was discussing then the role of a father in inheriting his son, and what we established yesterday, based on our conversations, is that it is clear that that the son of the deceased comes before the father of the deceased in the order or in the priority, ultimately again, of inheritance law. And we went ahead and we established that through two different proofs that really assert the hierarchy of the son over the father. Okay, so the Gemara advances an alternate drasha. Se'ima, we'll say four lines down from the top, Kuf Tes 109a. Ema, She'ero, Zeha'av. So we'll say, why don't we say that in the pasuk when it speaks about share? So remember again, the lashon of the pasuk is Vim ein achim la'aviv unesatem es nachala sodo she'ero hakerov elav. What's in the Torah speaking about the laws of inheritance says, you shall give his portion the she'ero hakerov elav to the relative who is closest to him. So maybe she'er, maybe that relative refers to the father. Melamed sheha'av kodem lebas. So we'll say maybe the Torah is teaching us that a father comes before a daughter. In other words, fine. I understand that you've established so far what? That you've established that a son comes before a father. Again, you understand when we say son and father, we're talking about in relationship to the deceased. So what we'll call Reuven is the deceased. So I understand that Reuven's son has priority in inheritance over Reuven's father. But maybe Sheiro, closest relative, teaches us that what? That the father of the deceased comes before the daughter of the deceased. Let's say Reuven dies, he leaves behind no daughters, he leaves behind no sons, but he does leave behind the daughter, so there are two surviving relatives. Reuven left behind a father, and Reuven left behind a daughter. I might have thought that perhaps the halacha is that Reuven's father has inheritance precedence over Reuven's daughter. So the Gemara says, Talmud Lomar, Hakarov. Therefore, the pasuk says it doesn't just say she'er; it says she'er hakarov. It says the closest relative, and hakarov karov kodem. The person who is more closely related, ultimately again to the deceased, is first in line for the inheritance. Therefore, again, Abosai, the Gemara is saying over here that because a daughter ultimately again is closer to the deceased than the father is to the deceased, therefore the daughter inherits before. We know that the daughter is closer. Kevan de le'inyan yibum ben obas kiad dadinenu le'inyan nachala nami ben obas kiad dadinenu. Because Rabbi say just like a son and daughter are the same legabe yibum. What does that mean that they're the same legabe yibum? That if a man dies and he leaves behind a son or a daughter, there is no mitzvah of yibum. This is a very important halacha. Remember, if a man leaves behind any children, be it a son or a daughter, there is no yibum. So the fact that the presence of a son or a daughter precludes yibum indicates to us what? That these are the closest relatives to the deceased. So the Gemara suggests just like this, it is a son or a daughter that precludes the yibum process from happening, so too again, for inheritance purposes, a son and daughter are the same as well. Which means what Rabbi is saying? That in the absence of a son, the daughter will be the next in line ultimately to inherit her father. So we'll say, so what we seem to be seeing right now is that in the order of the inheritance, we have first the son of the deceased, then the daughter of the deceased, and it would appear who comes after the daughter? Then the father of the deceased. So the Gemara says, Ve'ima, so maybe Sheiro Ze'av. So we'll say maybe Sheiro, the Gemara's not finished. Maybe Sheiro, maybe when the Torah discusses closest relative, that refers ultimately again to the father of the deceased. So we'll say, so what does that mean? So remember, now we've established that son is closer than father, meaning son of the deceased is closer than father of the deceased. Daughter of the deceased is closer than father of the deceased. So when we call the father the closest relatives, what that comes to tell me is what? Is that Lamaisa, he is inheriting before someone else. So who does the father of the deceased take precedence over? Melamed Sha'av Kodem La'achehav. Maybe he's coming to teach us that what? That the father of the deceased comes before, ultimately, again, his own brothers. In other words, maybe that the father of the deceased comes before the uncles of the deceased. Okay, the Gemara is entering a havamina that maybe uncles should have inheritance rights before the father of the deceased. Therefore, again, so the Gemara says, Yachal yaktim la'achim. I'm sorry. Ve'ema shero. I skipped over here. Ve'ema shero za'av. Sorry, I read that wrong. Melamid sha'av kodim la'achi ha'av. Yachal yaktim la'achim. So we'll say, I know now that a father comes before the uncles. Maybe the father should come before the actual brothers of the deceased as well. Talmud Lomar Hakarov. Therefore, the pasuk says no. That in inheritance, I will say we look for those who are more closely related. Karov, Kodem. Ultimately, again, he who is closer ultimately inherits the deceased first. So, both say the Gemara now is positing that perhaps brothers of the deceased are closer in line for inheritance than father of the deceased. Again, we're going to discuss that in greater depth. But the Gemara jumps back for just a moment. They will say, remember the first step of this argument. The first step of the argument is that the Gemara said that the father does come before the uncles. Right? The father of the deceased inherits before the uncles of the deceased. So the Gemara says, come on. Achi ha'av lo tzrich yikra. They will say, I don't need a pasuk to tell me that the father of the deceased comes before the uncles of the deceased. Meaning that's obvious. Achia av mikoach man ka'asu. They both say the havamina that uncles would inherit their nephew. They both say where does the power of the uncles come from? From their brother who is the father of the deceased. Mikoach av kai av. Kayarsi achyav. Rabbi say if the father, meaning if the potential entitlement of the uncles comes through their brother, who is the father of the deceased. So therefore I will say, if their brother who is the father of the deceased is alive, is there a havamina that the brothers, the uncles, would inherit over the father of the deceased? So of course, the answer to that is of course not. I will say, if the answer to that is just logically, of course not, I don't need a pasuk to teach me that. So we'll say, so the Gemara says now, so we'll say, where we seem to be holding right now is the following, is that the order for inheritance law will be the following. Number one, son. Number two, daughter, right? Daughter, right? We could group children, son, daughter. Number three, so we'll say, see, here's where it gets a little bit interesting. See, here what the Gemara seems to slide in here is who? Brothers of the deceased. Not uncle, brothers of the deceased. So again, we're going to come back and talk about that in just a little bit. And then after that will be father. Now after you get through father, we'll discuss maybe the next step after that is uncles. So we'll discuss that in greater depth. But in terms of the nuclear family, that's where we seem to be. Son, daughter, brothers of the deceased father. So the Gemara says the following. But one second. Now we'll say, here's the problem. So it appears that ultimately, again, that Lamaisa, we've established an order for inheritance. The problem is, Rabbi say, we've quoted a number of disjointed psukim. The psukim, the order that we've established, is not the order of the psukim. Right? Meaning, these individuals appear in the psukim in different orders than the actual inheritance order. So the Gemara says, D'chsev ve'im ein achim la'aviv, to which the Gemara says, Krai shelo kesidran ksivi. To which the Gemara answers, it will say, it's not a problem. So if you look at the Rashbam, look at the third wide line on the bottom of the Rashbam. Krai lav hachi ksivi, the she'iro lebasov kasav acher achei ha'av. So we'll say, at the end of the day, for example, the idea that children inherit comes after the discussion, ultimately, again, of uncles. So you see it. So what do we do with the fact that the psukim are not written in order? To which the Gemara says it's not a problem. Krai shelo kasidran ksivi. We'll say, what's the answer? The Pesukim are written in order. That's the answer. In other words, meaning that's not a problem for us. The idea that the Torah is not listing the individuals, the inheritance, or the inheritors in their proper order is not really problematic, because again, remember, in general, we're not bound by keeping the Torah in a general order. V'hai Tana ma'aseh mehacha. And I will say this Tana ultimately again learns this from the following idea. Look at the Rashbam. V'hai Tana ma'aseh mehacha da'av kodim la'achin. I will say this Tana learns out that the father comes before the brothers from the following halacha. Listen to this. Es zu darash Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yossi darshan the following idea: Ish kiyamos uben ein lo. So we'll say the pasuk says, if a man will die and he does not have a son, So we'll say, so the Torah says, v'ha'avartem es nachaloso lebito. That's what the pasuk says. A man dies, he does not have a son. V'ha'avartem. V'ha'avartem means what? You shall transfer the property, or his nachala, his inheritance, to his daughter. So watch this. B'makom bas. So we'll say, what the Gemara is picking up on is the following. If you look at the Rashbam says v'ha'avarta, mashma ta'am. It's 6 lines up from the bottom. Mashma ta'avir mikarov zeh shuhu kayim kadei lasos lazeh v'avarta min ha'av kadei lasos lazeh. So we'll say the lashon of v'ha'avarta. So towards the following: the man dies and he doesn't have a son. You shall transfer, right? Or you shall transfer his property, his nachala, his inheritance to his daughter. Now, it could have just said what? It could have just said v'nasata, you will give. V'ha'avarta, will say, the Gemara understands, means that you're transferring that property from a person who could have or should have been the heir to someone else. So who are you taking the property from in order to give it to the daughter? To which the Gemara darshans, b'makom bas ata ma'avir nachala min ha'av. I will say, what the Torah is teaching us is, when a man dies without a son, it's obvious that it goes to the son. If there's no son, I would not necessarily have known, or I would have assumed that who does it go to? It goes to who? The father. The father of the deceased. Therefore, the Torah comes along and teaches me, no, the halacha is, v'ha'avartem es nachaloso lebito. The Torah teaches me that I transfer that property from who would have been the intended recipient, i.e., the father, and I transfer that to the daughter. B'makom bas ata ma'avir nachala min ha'av. When there's a daughter, v'ha'avartem, you transfer the property that would have gone to the father, and you now give it to the daughter. V'i ata ma'avir b'nachala min ha'av, B'makom achin. But I will say, ultimately, again, where there are brothers. Now I will say, here we're talking about brothers of the deceased. Because remember, again, we took off the table the discussion about uncles. Where there are brothers of the deceased. So I will say, when a man dies, and there's no son, there is no daughter, but he leaves behind brothers. So I will say, in a case like that, I do not transfer the property of the deceased from the father to the brothers, rather the property goes to the father. So we'll say, according to this Tana, what we're learning over here is that what? The order of inheritance is son, daughter, father, then brothers of the deceased. Remember, uncles are no longer really part of this discussion right now. So the Gemara says, Ve'ima b'makom bas ata ma'avir nachala min ha'achin. But maybe it's the following. Maybe the Torah is coming to teach me that when there is a daughter, we will take the property from the brothers. Amud Beis, v'ata ma'avir nachala min ha'av afilu b'makom bas. We'll say maybe the Halamin is teaching like this. V'avartan teaches me that when there is no son and there is no father, the property would normally go next to who? To the brothers of the deceased. Therefore, v'ha'avartem teaches me that what? No, we take it from the brothers and we give it to the daughter. In other words, if there's a daughter, we take it from the brothers, we give it to the daughter. But if there's a father there, maybe that nachala, maybe that inheritance does not go to the daughter. In other words, we'll say, you understand what's happening over here? What the Gemara is picking up on over here is an interesting word of v'ha'avartem. V'ha'avartem means that when this man dies, that property is going to someone, meaning, let me say differently. Torah is coming from the perspective that the idea that a daughter inherits is a chiddush. It's chiddush, and it is Rabbi. It is a chiddush. Meaning, remember again, the fact that a daughter inherits only comes about through what? Through benos slavchad. Right? Remember again, this was a novel thing. So what the Torah is telling me is, when a man dies without a son, I would have thought that his property goes to X. Fill in the blank. And kamash shmolan v'ha'avartem, when there's a surviving daughter, you take it from that otherwise intended heir and you give it to the daughter. The shayla is, who's the blank? Who's the blank? So at first the Gemara says, I'll tell you who the blank is. The blank is the father. Meaning, I would have thought that if there's no son, so the property goes to the father of the deceased. Father of the deceased. Va'avartem tells you give it to the daughter. But Rabbi said, what do you see from here? You see from here that a father is first in line before the brothers of the deceased. Says Zimar, 1 second. Maybe what it means is the following. When there is no father, the property would have gone to the brothers. Va'avartem, and the Torah tells take it from the brothers of the deceased and give it to the daughter. But if there is a surviving father, if the son predeceases his father, then maybe what? Then maybe the father gets the property, even when what Rabbi say? Even when there is a daughter there. Imkain, we'll say Kuf Tesla Beis 109b, second line. Imkain lo nichtov rachmana va'avartem. We'll say if that's the case, then the Torah should not say va'avartem. In other words, if that's the case that a father goes ahead and inherits his son even when there is a daughter, then don't use the lashon of va'avartem, which means that someone is entitled, but then it's being removed. According to the opinion learns that from va'avartem, Hai sheiro my avidlei. What does he do with the pasuk or with the phrase of sheiro? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you what he needs. My avidlei mi boile l'chidisanya. He needs Rabbi for the following teaching. Sheiro zu ishto. Rabbi says she'er refers to the wife. Malamed shahabal yorish es ishto. Rabbi says, where does that come to teach us? It teaches us that a husband inherits his wife. Ulaman dinafkale misheiro. But Rabbi say ultimately the one who is learning this out from the word sheiro. So hi va'avartem my avidlei. What does he do with the word va'avartem? Mi baile l'chidisanya. Rabbi say needs it for the following drasha. Rabbi Omer bakulan ne'emar bahen nesina v'kan ne'emra bahen ha'avara. Rabbi say this is an interesting halacha. In every other case of inheritance, the lashon of inheritance is nesina, is giving. A man dies and he gives his property to his fill in the blank. One exception, when it comes to the inheritance of a daughter. When it comes to the inheritance of a daughter, a man dies and he leaves behind a daughter. V'ha'avartem es nachalaso lebito. You will go ahead and literally transfer, or avartem, you will pass over, you will transfer his property to his daughter. Why is it that in every other context of inheritance, the lashon is nesina, giving, yet by daughter, the lashon is ha'avara? Oh, I'll tell you why it says the Gemara. Listen to this. She'en lecha shema'avir nachala mishevet l'shevet ela bas. I will say, because the only time where an inheritance could result in what we'll call a tribal transfer, in a transfer of land from one shevet to another, is in what case, Rabbi Osai? Where a daughter inherits. Why? Hoil ubena ubayla yarshin osa. Rabbi Osai, the interesting part about when a daughter inherits is that the possibility exists that what? That this property that began as part of one shevet will end up being part of another shevet. We'll say, how does that happen? Remember again, Ruvain, let's assume for a moment that Ruvain is from shevet Ruvain. So what happens? He dies, he leaves behind one daughter, right? That's his own. He leaves behind one daughter, she inherits. She married a man from shevet Shimon. So what happens, I will say? Right now, while she's alive, no problem, the property is hers. When she dies, the assumption is that her property passes to her husband or her son, depending on whatever the circumstances are at the time of her death, which means now that her property, which technically is part of the tribal portion of Reuven, now becomes part of Shevet Shimon. Therefore, we'll say the Torah alludes to this process. So here's what's interesting. Seeing one might have thought that perhaps, again, Lamaisa, therefore a daughter should never be able to go ahead and inherit unless she's married into her own shevet. Kamashal, we'll see, you understand, by the way, that was the compromise with the daughters of Tzlavchad. Right? The compromise with the daughters of Tzlavchad is that they married men from their own shevet in order that there should not be a tribal transfer of property. But Lamaisa, that's not the halacha. A woman is not bound, if she inherits, to just go ahead and marry within her own shevet. So the Maisa, again, the Torah used lashon of v'havarta. V'havarta means that there is the possibility that under these circumstances, she's going to inherit, and that property is going to move from one tribe to another. Okay. Umimai the she'ero za'av. So we'll say, I think Gemara is jumping back. So how do we know that she'er means the father? How do we know that? So we'll say, how do we know that she'er is the father? Listen to this. L'chsiv she'er avicha. Because we'll say the pasuk, we're actually talking about arayos. There's an acharimos, right? Ultimately, again, talks about she'er avicha, the relative of your father. So you see that she'er connotes a paternal relationship. I emos she'ero za'im. Maybe she'er means the mother. After all, the chsiv she'er imcha. Right? The pasuk says, use the same notion of she'er by the mother as well. To which the Gemara says, Amar Rava, Amar Kra. Listen to this. Mimishpachto v'yaresh osa. Because the pasuk uses lashon of mimishpachto. Mishpachas av kriya mishpacha, mishpachas aim in a kriya mishpacha. We'll say, what does this mean? The mishpacha of your father is called a mishpacha. The mishpacha of your mother is not called a mishpacha. And we'll say, what does that mean? What does that mean? Tichsiv lemishpachosam lebeis savosam. Because I will say, what it's saying is the following: that the halachic terminology of mishpacha, ultimately, again, is used in relationship to one's father's family. Because the terminology of Mishpacha Rabbosai also has tribal connotations. And just as it is the father's family, or the father's affiliation, or the father who establishes tribal affiliation, therefore from a halachic perspective, when we use the word Mishpacha, that is referring to a paternal relationship. I'm sorry? Don't try this one at home. Correct. Don't use this to get at family events on the other side. Correct. Umishpachas aim in a kriya. The Gemara challenges this. They both say, now we're going to get into a really fascinating Gemara. Is that true? So what the Gemara is suggesting over here is therefore halacha l'maisa. Whenever you see the Torah referring to mishpacha, mishpacha refers to one's father's family. And therefore, again, this gets into the idea, therefore, that she'er also refers to father. But just before we go on, just understand what we've established. What we've established so far for the order of inheritance is as follows. Is number one, order of inheritance is the son of the deceased. Number two, daughter of the deceased. Number three, father of the deceased. Number four, brothers of the deceased. And I will say, obviously, after that, it just goes to whoever is closest relative. So that seems to be the order that we've established right now. So says the Gemara. So now, the Gemara made a statement. The Gemara said that whenever we see mishpacha mentioned in the Torah, it refers to the mishpacha of the father. So ultimately, again, the Gemara says, is that true? That mishpachas ein kri mishpacha? That the mishpacha of your mother, the family of your mother, is not called mishpacha, as well as is not halachically, meaning that when the Torah refers to mishpacha, it's not referring to the mishpacha of the mother. But we learned, this is actually an amazing Gemara. There was a man from Beis Lechem Yehuda, which means he lived in Beis Lechem, Mishpachas Yehuda, from the family of Yehuda, V'hu Levi, and he was a Levi, V'hu Gar Sham, and he lived there. Now, what are we talking about over here? We're talking about over here, if you take a look at the Rashbam, almost right across from the Rashbam, Vahinar, B'Sefer Shoftim Ksiv, B'Parshas Pislo Shal Micha. This is about Pesal Micha. Pesal Micha, refers to in Sefer Shoftim, that there was a man who decided essentially to make like a breakaway. Right? He decided to go ahead and make a breakaway from the Mishkan, and he decided to go ahead and essentially establish his own Beis HaMikdash. So he set up an idol, and he hired for himself his own Kohen Gadol. His own Kohen Gadol. And this is the Torah, the Navi here is describing the Kohen Gadol. He was a Nar, he was a young man, Mi Beis Lechem Yehuda, Mi Mishpach, from the family of Yehuda, V'hu Levi, and he was a Levi, V'hu Gar Sham. So we'll say, this is describing again the Kohen Gadol of Pesal Micha. So base Pesal Micha, that was the name of this new breakaway. And the Maisa, again, this guy hired his own Kohen Gadol. So we'll say, the Gemara says, there's an inherent contradiction in the Pasuk. What's the inherent contradiction? Hu Gufakasha. Amrat V'hu Levi, Avam Levi Asa. So we'll say, you're telling me he's a Levi, which means that he's from Shevet Levi. Mimishpachas Yehuda, but then you're telling me that what? that he's from the family of Yehuda. Alma mi Yehuda asi. That means he's from Yehuda. So we'll say, so meaning, which one is it? Is he a Levi or is he from Yehuda? Ella lav da'avuha mi Levi. Rather, what you have to say is the following. When it says Vuhu Levi, Rabbi will say that means what? His father was from Levi. V'ime me Yehuda. And his mother was from Yehuda. V'ka'amar mishpachas Yehuda. And yet, the Navi says that's what? That he is from the family of Yehuda. Rabbi will say, what do you see from that? You see from that, so that means his father was from Levi, his mother was from Yehuda, and yet the Navi identifies him as mishpachas Yehuda, which means that what? Mishpachas ein kuruya mishpacha. You see that your mother's mishpacha, or specifically your mother's tribal affiliation, absolutely is important. It's important in terms of the identity of the child. So the Gemara says, no. Amar Rava bar Rav Chanan, lo gavra dishmei Levi. So Rava bar Chanan says, we'll say, he wasn't from Shevet Levi, rather what? His name was Levi. He was from Shevet Yehuda, and his name was Levi. Ihachi, but that doesn't make sense. I'll tell you why. Hainu dekar Micha, because we'll say Micha. Remember again, who's Micha? Who's Micha? Micha's the president of the breakaway, right? Micha is the guy, right? He's the founder. He's the founder, ultimately, again, of Beis Micha, of this house, this Beis Medrash, this house of Avodah Zarah. So what does Micha say? Both sides. So this is amazing. Micha says, "Ata yadati ki yetiv Hashem li." I now know that God has blessed my endeavors. And as well say, understand, idolatry does not preclude the belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Idolatry just often goes in and sees HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the wrong things, in idols and other things. So Micha Rabosai, after Micha goes out at the Chanukah Sabayis, right, he's very happy. Right, they laid the cornerstone. So Micha says, it is clear to me that the Ribono Shalom has blessed my endeavors. How is it clear to me that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has blessed my endeavors? Ki haya li halevi lekohen. Because look, he even provided for me someone from Shevet Levi to be my Kohen Gadol. In other words, what hashgacha pratis? That the Ribono Shalom has provided me with a guy from Shevet Levi to be my Kohen Gadol. By the way, an incredible lesson, which is what? The ability to convince yourself of the correctness of your ways. Right? They will say, if a person is not open to seeing the truth, it's amazing how you could see your own truth in whatever you want. So the Gemara will say, but the point is, what do you see from here? You see from here that Micha is so happy about the fact that he found the guy from Shevet Levi. So you see, again, the Gemara wanted to suggest that this Kohen Gadol, his name was Levi, but he was really from Shevet Yehuda. But that doesn't make sense, because Micha himself seems to be so happy about the fact that what? That he found someone from Shevet Levi to be the Kohen Gadol. To which the Gemara says, in the Isramile Gavra Dishmei Levi. No. What Micha was happy about was what? The guy was from Shevet Yehuda, the Kohen Gadol. But Micha was at least happy that his name was Levi. Right? At least if his name is Levi, that shows it's Hashkachas Hashem. His name is Levi, which is the name of the Shevet that Kahuna comes from. It's clear that the Ribono Shalom is blessing my endeavors. Amazing. We'll say, we laugh at this, but I'll tell you a little secret. We do this all the time, right? Each of us does this all the time, right? When we want to justify something that we really want to do, that I know deep down is really not the right thing, but I see it's hashgacha pratis. Obviously, the Ribono Shalom is blessing these endeavors. Amazing. Now, here's where it gets wild. Get ready for this. Now, but was this Kohen Gadol's name Levi? That wasn't his name. V'halo Yehonasan Shmo. The both say his name was Yonasan. Shene'emar V'Yehonasan ben Gershom uben Menashe. Yonasan, the son of Gershom, the son of Menashe. Hu ubanav hayu kohanim l'shevet hadani. I will say, ultimately, again, they became the kohanim. Ultimately, again, for the tribe of Dan. Now, I will say, I want to just tell you over here, meaning just so you know how this story ends. What do you mean from Shevet Dan? I will say, we're going to see that this Kohen Gadol, Yonasan, was excellent. Mamish, he was an excellent idolatrous Kohen Gadol. Mamish, the drashas were inspiring. Everything was wonderful. He did a great job. How do you know he did a good job? He got a competing offer from another tribe, right, to run their base Avodah Zarah. So ultimately, again, he gets hired out. He got a better offer from Shevet Dan. to go ahead and be their high priest for Avodah Zarah. And again, not only that, but he got his kids into the Malacha also, right? Meaning his sons also got into this as well. So, but the Navi identifies him. His name wasn't Levi. His name was Yonasan, the son of Gershom, the son of Menashe. So we'll say, get ready for this. Hold on to your seats. So Vahalo, the Gemara says, well, the Tamech, the Chi ben Menashehu, we'll say he wasn't the son of Menashe. Vahalo ben Moshehu. We'll say, do you know who this man was? This was the Emical. This was the grandson of Moshe Rabbeinu. This was the grandson of Moshe Rabbeinu. We'll say, this is Yonasan ben Gershom ben Moshe. This was a son. Remember, Moshe Rabbeinu has two sons, Gershom and Eliezer. So ultimately, again, this is the son of Gershom, the grandson of Moshe Rabbeinu, who becomes this high priest for Avodah Zarah. But we're going to have to tackle this issue. This issue. So if that's the case, why do they call him Ben Menashe? So we'll say, if he's really Yonasan ben Gershom ben Moshe, why call him Yonasan ben Gershom ben Menashe? I'm sorry. If it's really Yonasan ben Gershom ben Moshe, why call him Yonasan ben Gershom ben Menashe? To which the Gemara says, V'chi ben Menashe, v'alo ben Moshe, v'chsiv b'nei Moshe, Gershom ve'Eliezer. The sons of Moshe, Gershom and Eliezer. Elo mitoch sha'asa ma'ase Menashe, t'lo ha'kasa ben Menashe. I both say, because ultimately, again, this young man, Yonasan, acted like Menashe. I will say, who was Menashe? Take a look in the Rashbam. 3 lines down in the wide lines. 3rd wide line. Elamitoch sha'asa ma'ase Menashe, ben Chizkiah, melech Yehuda, sha'avad avodah zarah, telo ha'kasav ben Menashe, ha'chenami li'olam mishev. So I will say, listen to this. So the Gemara suggests the following. Much later on in history, there's another king. He's a king by the name of Menashe. Menashe is the longest serving monarch. For 55 years he is the king. 33 of them he is a terrible Rasha who introduces Avodah Zarah into every corner of Klal Yisrael. 22 of them he tries to do tshuva. But again, he had committed so many wrongs and so many spiritual atrocities that he was unable to reverse that which he had done. The Torah calls Yehonasan, the son of Gershom, the son of Menashe, links him to King Menashe. Even though Menashe lives many generations after Yonasan, what the Torah is doing is linking them, not because they're actually related, but why? Spiritually related. In other words, because of both their sinful behaviors. So Rabbi said, the Gemara says, Elamitoch she'asa ma'ase Menashe. So listen to this. The Gemara says, Elamitoch she'asa ma'ase Menashe, tzal ha'kasa Menashe. Because Yonasan also practiced idolatry and spread idolatry like Menashe, therefore the Torah relates him to Menashe. Hachinami, mitoch she'asa ma'ase Menashe, da'asi mi Yehuda, telo ha'kasa v'Yehuda. So to over here, Rabbi say that since ultimately, again, this Yonasan went ahead and conducted himself like Menashe, and Menashe came from Yehuda. Therefore, the Navi links Yonasan's tribal affiliation with Yehuda as well. So, both say. So, essentially, what comes out from this discussion? What comes out from this discussion is the young man. What tribe does this young man, right, the Kohen Gadol, for the idolatry of Micha, for base Micha, right? What tribe does he come from? Levi, right? Because he is an Enokel, he's a grandson ultimately of Moshe Rabbeinu. So why does it link him to Yehuda? I will say for the same reason that the Torah links his genealogy to Menashe, right? That it calls him Yonasan ben Gershom ben Menashe. So when it links his genealogy ultimately to Yehuda, it's for the following reason. He's related, quote unquote, to Menashe because they were both incredible idolaters. So too it links his tribal affiliation to Yehuda, which was the tribe ultimately of Menashe, that he wasn't related to them in actuality, meaning that he was related to them spiritually in that both, unfortunately, practiced rampant idolatry. So I'll say, the Gemara now kind of veers off our original discussion to go into something else. We'll say, what do we learn from this story? We learn from this story, Mikan shetolines hakalkala b'makulkal. So I'll say what we see from here ultimately again is that you go ahead and literally you hang the kalkala, you hang the inappropriate behavior on he who is already mikulkal, on he that is already, messed up. In other words, that ultimately again we link negative behavior to those who are known for their negative behavior. So we'll say what's happening over here is we link this young man, Yehonasan, to Menashe. That since Menashe was an idolater, we link Menashe's, or we link Yonasan's negative behavior to Menashe's negative behavior. Now, listen to this. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina Amar Mehacha, v'gamhu tov toar ma'od, v'oso yolda acharei Avshalom. So we'll say, the Gemara over here is describing the episode in Melachim, where ultimately, again, Adoniyo ben Chagis. This is the beginning of Sefer Melachim. David HaMelech is on his deathbed, and one of David HaMelech's sons, Adoniyo, goes out to proclaim himself king. Remember again, David HaMelech at this point in time has not yet made a declarative statement that Shlomo is going to be king. So where there's a little bit of a power vacuum because David HaMelech is dying. He's literally on his deathbed. Adoniyo ben Chagis goes on and proclaims himself the new monarch. The Gamhu Tov Tawari was a very good looking boy. V'oso yolda acharei Avshalom, and he was born after Avshalom. Now both say that phrase, he was born after Avshalom, makes it sound that what? That Adoniya ben Chagis and Avshalom are of the same mother. But it's not true. V'alo Adoniya ben Chagis, Adoniya was the son of Chagis, v'Avshalom ben Ma'acha, and Avshalom's mother was Ma'acha. Both say they have different mothers. So why does it make it sound like they were born, by making it sound that they were born one after the other, it makes it sound they had the same mother? Elo, mitoch sha'asa ma'isa Avshalom, demarred b'malchus, but since Adoniya conducted himself like Avshalom, meaning they both rebelled against the monarchy, Tilo HaKasav Ba'avshalom. Ultimately, again, the Torah links these. So in other words, we'll say, this is an incredible yisod. You know who you're really related to in life? You're really related to in life the people whose behaviors you emulate. So the mice, again, Adoniya ben Chagis, you emulated Avshalom. That's your relative. Hachanami mitoch she'asa ma'isa Menashe tila kasam Menashe. So to over here, this Yonasan went ahead and emulated Menashe in that he went ahead and he worshipped idolatry. Therefore, the Torah links him in relationship to Menashe. We'll say, which if you think about it, by the way, is an incredible yesod. Your real family in life are the people you choose to emulate. So you could be related to the most wonderful tzaddikim. This Kohen Gadol of Pesel Micha was a grandson of Moshe Rabbeinu. Yet what? That is not who the Navi links his genealogy to. Why? Because just because he was a blood relative to Moshe Rabbeinu, the way he acted through his idolatrous ways, he wasn't related to Moshe. He's related to Menashe. Let's say it's an incredible yesod in life. Who you are related to, or who you are identified with, who you are linked to, is a result of how you behave in life. You behave like a tzaddik, you're linked to the tzaddikim. You behave like a rasha, you're linked to the risham. But I'm related to tzaddikim. No, you're not. If at the end of the day my behavior is not tzaddik-like, if my behavior is negative, then unfortunately what that does is it casts me together with the risham. Shabbos, the Gemara introduces a fascinating topic which we'll begin today and have to continue into tomorrow. Amar Belazar, li'olam yidbak adam betovim. Shabbos, a person should always try to cling to good people. And I will say, what this sounds like over here is that Lamaisa, again, is talking about marriage. That a person should always try to marry into a good mishpacha. Why? Shahari Moshe Shenasa Bas Yisro Yatsa Mimenu Yehonasan. But I say it's a very profound Gemara. But what is the Gemara struggling with? The Gemara is struggling with is, how does a Yonasan come out to a Moshe Rabbeinu? How is it that Moshe Rabbeinu has a grandson who is a high priest for idolatry? I will say again, I wanted to point out, not like a recreational Oved Avodah Zarah, right? Not like on the weekends, but mamish, like this guy, this man Yonasan, the grandson of Moshe Rabbeinu, he was the best. He was good. How do we know he was good? How do we know? He got competing offers, right? Meaning again, he's getting signing bonuses, mamish, he's getting all kinds of different things from this tribe to that tribe. Where does that come from? Meaning, I'm sorry? The wife, right? That's the short answer. That is the short answer, right? We'll elaborate a little bit. So the idea the Gemara understands over here is, I will say, this is going to get into the really fascinating discussion in terms of that. I will say, as much as we like to say, who you are is what matters, your genes do matter as well. The family you come from, and specifically, again, almost like the genetic material, the spiritual material in your spiritual DNA, absolutely has an impact on the offspring you produce. Moshe Rabbeinu married a girl who was a very wonderful girl. When Shenasa Bas Yisro, Yotzei Mena Yonasan. What does that mean? Yisro wasn't Oved Avodah Zarah. It's true he was Chozer B'Tshuva, and it's true ultimately, again, he renounced his idolatry, but there's a lot of stuff in that DNA. There's a lot of stuff that's there. And as such, again, some of that stuff does not necessarily go away and remains almost in a residual fashion embedded within the fabric of the family. And sometimes that is going to come out. On the other hand, Aaron Shenasa Bas Aminadav, Rabbi say Aaron, who married the daughter of Aminadav, Yotza Mimeno Pinchas. So Rabbi say, interestingly enough, the Torah is contrasting the grandchildren of Moshe and Aaron. Moshe has a grandson like Yehonasan. Aaron has a grandson like Pinchas. How do you account ultimately, again, for the differences in their offspring? So the Gemara suggests that the difference is accounted by or through who they married. The mishpachos into which they married. Ultimately, I suppose we'll have to stop over here. We'll pick up Emir Hashem with this really incredible discussion tomorrow.
It's interesting. Yisro was one a righteous death.